Good evening and welcome to India Missions Live. We present a very special series today, which is Understanding Financial Aid, Completing the FAFSA and CSS Profile. My name is Jatan Davis and I will be your host and moderator for tonight. I'm the Assistant Director of New Media Communications and it is an honor to have you join us. Before I let my colleagues introduce themselves, we just want to say congratulations to all of you who have been admitted to the class of 2019 in the restrictive early action process, and best of luck to those who've applied in regular decision who's waiting to hear what your future will be. So without further ado, I will turn it over to my colleagues. Mary?
Thank you, Shatan. Well, good evening, and thank you for being with us tonight. My name is Mary Nucciaroni, and I serve as the Director of Financial Aid at the University of Notre Dame. And we're really happy to have you with us for this FAFSA and Profile Completion Night. And we hope by the end of the time we've taken some of the mystery and some of the fear that you might have about this process out of it. So thank you for joining in, and hopefully we can get to most of the questions that you have, or we'll be answering them as we go through our presentation. Christy?
I'm Christy Miller. I'm one of the Associate Directors here in the Office of Financial Aid at Notre Dame as well. And I just want to say welcome. So hopefully we'll be able to get to most of your questions. And just a reminder that this presentation will be posted on the admissions website afterwards as well, in case you have friends or family members that didn't get a chance to view it today.
That's right.
All right, so I think we're going to jump right in here. Bear with me as I'm trying to learn this new system here. So tonight we're going to cover the free application for federal student aid, better known as FAFSA. We're also going to cover the CSS financial aid profile, which is used by the University of Notre Dame as well as some other schools. And then we're also going to cover a little bit about Institutional Documentation Service, or IDOC, which is a document collection service that Notre Dame uses as well. So first of all, some very important dates for you to keep track of. February 15th is the priority submission date for Notre Dame. So that would be both for the FAFSA and for the CSS financial aid profile. We ask that you try your best to get them to us by February 15th. We realize that that's quite a quick turnaround time with your tax information, probably your W-2s not being available until the end of January. However, you can file using estimated information, and we encourage you to go ahead and do that if it's possible to get those applications in by the 15th. Also, Institutional Documentation Service, or IDOC, your information to them is due by March 2nd. Again, we realize that sometimes that's quite a quick turnaround time, so there's not going to be any penalties if you don't get it in by that date. However, how we review the financial aid applications is kind of a first in, first out kind of a thing. So the quicker that you can get us your information, the quicker that you'll hear from our office. So before we get started here, some things that you'll need to gather and be prepared with in order to complete the FAFSA and the profile. Definitely want to have your Social Security number on hand. Also, your most recent federal income tax return. So that would be for the calendar year 2014. Also, any wage statements, W-2s, and then other taxable income. So maybe you own a business, you would need information about that kind of income as well. Also, any untaxed income that you would have. A lot of times you'll see this information either on your tax return or your W-2s as well. Bank statements, you'll also want to keep track of those or have those with you as you move forward in preparing the FAFSA and the profile. Any investment, so whether it's checking account, savings account, not necessarily your retirement, although you'll need that, some of that information when we get to the profile application, but not for the FAFSA. Also, something maybe you know, maybe you don't, the FAFSA and the profile are actually SMART applications. What I mean by SMART is depending upon the type of questions that you are or how you answer types of questions will determine what you're actually seeing when you're going through the application. So some of you may see a lot of questions, some of you may see just a few questions. So we will try to go through all of the questions, but don't be alarmed if you're going through and you don't see every question that we're showing to you today.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so jumping right into the FAFSA. Just a quick note, you'll notice that the very first word in free application for federal student aid is free. So just a reminder, as you're going through this, you'll want to go to the correct website. If by chance you end up at FAFSA.com or some other website that tries to ask you to pay to file the FAFSA, just know that it is intended to be a free application through the federal Department of Education website. So make sure you're paying attention when you're going to complete your FAFSA. So one of the very first things that you should do when completing your FAFSA application is to get a PIN. And you will use this PIN as a student, and also the parents will be required to get a PIN as well. And you'll use this to sign your FAFSA electronically. So you can actually go to the PIN website, which you'll see on the slide there. It's pen.ed.gov, and this is what you'll use to sign the FAFSA. This will actually be used for the entire amount of time that you are completing a FAFSA. So keep in mind, financial aid is an annual process. You'll do this every year, and you'll use the same PIN for the FAFSA every year. However, I'm going to throw a little wrench in that. The feds decided that they wanted to go to a username and password format starting this year on April 25th. So if you file the FAFSA before April 25th, you can use your PIN. But if you're going in to make corrections or filing your FAFSA for next year, you'll actually be required to create a username and password. So keep that in mind.
And just a really quick comment on that too, in addition to what Christy said, parents, if you're doing two FAFSAs, let's say you have two children going to college, each student has to have their own unique PIN. You will use the same PIN on each student's each student's FAFSA. So you don't need a new PIN, but each student would need a PIN number.
Very good point. Oops, I'm using my left hand and I'm not left-handed here. All right, so after you have your PIN, or if you're waiting until April, which hopefully you're not, but after you have your PIN, you can actually go to the FAFSA website, which is FAFSA.gov. And it's F as in Frank, A as in Apple, F as in Frank, S as in Sam, A as in Apple. Again, try not to go to any of the other websites like FAFSA.com because they will attempt to charge you, and there's a good chance that your schools will never get the information. So it is free to file the FAFSA. If you'd like, there's actually lots of tools out there on YouTube. You can YouTube 7 Easy Steps to the FAFSA, and there's a quick little video. It may be more entertaining than Mary and I.
We don't think so. We think we're much more entertaining.
But if you'd like, you can go out there and YouTube how to complete your FAFSA. There's also some tools once you get to the FAFSA website that you might find helpful. So there's a pre-application worksheet, which you can actually print off. And if you don't have your information tonight or when you sit down to work on the FAFSA, you can actually use the worksheet to help you get all of the answers to the questions that you might see on the FAFSA.
Keep in mind, though, as Christy said before, the FAFSA on the web is smart, and it's only going to ask you questions that you need to answer, while the worksheet has all questions that are possible to be asked. So there may be, again, a difference between the pre-application worksheet and the actual FAFSA as it presents itself online.
Right. The questions do follow the same order that you'll see on the FAFSA on the web, on the worksheet, but like Mary mentioned, you may not have all of those questions, or you may not be asked every one of those questions as you're going through the FAFSA. All right, so if we're ready and you have all of your information together, we can go ahead and get started. So I'm assuming most of you out there are prospective freshmen or incoming freshmen. And so you would be starting a new FAFSA. So you'll see my little arrow there on the screen pointing to start a new FAFSA. Now keep in mind, we talked earlier about this being an annual process, so you will be a return user next year as a sophomore. So you'll be able to log in, and the majority of your information that you entered, at least your demographical information, will be there next year when you log into your FAFSA. So really this year is the first year that you're going to have to enter everything, versus next year, hopefully you'll have most of that information already entered. Okay, so moving right along, the very first thing that you're going to do is enter your name and your social security number and birth date. The Department of Education uses these identifiers quite frequently, so make sure you take extra care and enter your social security number and your birth date especially correctly. And part of the reason why I say that is because the schools that this information is going to, whether it's Notre Dame or another school, also uses that information as identifiers to help us know who you are when we get your FAFSA record into our system. So in order for us to be able to know that this FAFSA belongs to you, then we need that information.
And just a note of caution, we're in a student section here, as you see on the left side of blue. So you and your refers to the student. So parents, if you're filling this out, the your does not mean your social security number or your birth date as a parent. We're talking about a student. So both applications, when you're in these, make sure that you understand what section you are in so that you know what the pronoun that they're using, who that's referring to.
That's a really good point. You see the bar on the left-hand side of the screen. Actually, oops, we flipped forward there.
Sorry.
We were just testing
We're trying to
something.
multitask, so while we go to the next slide, Mary's going to take a look at the questions, okay?
Perfect. Perfect. So yeah, the bar on the left-hand side, definitely pay attention to that because it's a very clear indicator what kind of information you should be entering. So we can see here that the information that has been entered is for the student. And our imaginary student tonight is Jane Domer. She's going to be coming to Notre Dame this fall, hopefully. So all of this information is fabricated, obviously, but we thought it would be cute, or at least I thought it would be cute to have a Notre Dame name.
I think it's cute.
Thanks. All right, so we're moving into the FAFSA now. We have our identifiers already in. And we're seeing that you have actually an option to choose either, I can't talk tonight, choose the 15-16 FAFSA or the 14-15. There's actually two FAFSA applications available to students currently, but as incoming freshmen this fall, you want to make sure that you select 15-16 because that is the academic year that you'll be entering school. So keep that in mind. Make sure you're choosing the right year. If you choose 14-15, we may not ever get that information because you weren't a student here in 14-15. All right, next it's asking you to create a password. And basically this password will be used so that you can come back into the FAFSA record later on if by chance you need to make a correction or need to send it to another school. Lots of different reasons why you might need to come back into the FAFSA later on. You'll want to make sure that you create a password and write it down so that you remember it. Or if it's a password that you use frequently, something that you'll remember. Also, just a note, as you're going through the FAFSA, you may notice on the right-hand side there's lots of helpful hints. So if you're curious or have a question about a particular field that you're in, if your cursor is in that field, those helpful hints on the right-hand side of the screen should give you an indicator of what they're asking for, kind of like instructions. Also, if you really need help, at the bottom there's a Need Help button. Click on that and that will help you. The instructions page is kind of an intermediary page. There's not really anything that you need to do here. It's more about useful information. So, I can't even read that. How can I help? How can I get help in completing my FAFSA? It's the very first thing. So obviously we're trying to make it as simple as possible. And so is the Department of Ed. So they're giving you lots of resources. You can click on each one of those links and it'll bring up another page which gives you some information.
And actually Christy's covered a lot of the things that are on this page, or we plan to cover them as we go through the screen. So hopefully we'll answer these questions without you needing to go back into them.
All right, so the next page is basically your demographical information. And this is the information that will transfer forward in future years also. So when you go in and complete a renewal FAFSA in your sophomore, junior, and senior year, all of this information should populate and you have the ability just to review it and make sure that it's correct or make changes if you need to do so. So again, your name and social security number and birth date should automatically populate because you've already provided that information, and then it's asking other demographical information for you. So this asks some questions which will help determine your eligibility for financial aid. So you do have to be a U.S. citizen or permanent resident of the United States in order to qualify for federal student aid. So that's part of the reason why they're asking this question. It's also asking what form of education will you have at this point. Most of you will have had, will have your high school diploma when you're entering college. And what year in school you are. So most of you will have never attended college. Some of you may have taken classes at a community college or something like that beforehand, but the majority of you will be never attended.
But I would also say for those of you who might be completing some dual enrollment, you're most likely not receiving any federal financial aid, so we would suggest to you that you indicate that you've never attended college.
You also, most of you will be working on your first bachelor's, so make sure you select that. If you have any interest in work study, which basically means you have the opportunity to work here on campus, or if you're eligible at a paid community service position off campus through federal work study, if you're interested in that, you can select yes for that.
And if this isn't a commitment question either, selecting yes or no doesn't mean we're not going to offer you work. Selecting yes doesn't commit you to working even if we put it in your package. So it's more of an informative question for us to understand kind of your priorities, but it's not necessarily used in how we put together your financial aid notification.
Right. It also asks if you'll have your first bachelor's degree before July of this year. That's really just to see whether or not you're a graduate student. So you guys are going to be freshmen, so you won't be graduate students, so your answer to that question would likely be no. And then also the highest school level that your parents have completed. So in our example, one of Jane Domer's parents is a college graduate, the other one completed high school.
And just a very quick comment on here. There's a couple questions that I've seen on the question board, so thank you for all of you who are submitting questions. And the parent who should be completing the FAFSA, if it is a situation of a divorce or a separation, would be the custodial parent. So let's say custodial parent is mom. Mom would complete the FAFSA. Dad is not living in the home. He would not have any information that would be included on this application. Another scenario might be mom is the custodial parent. She is remarried. She and her new spouse would be completing the FAFSA together with both of their information. There's another question, can my mom fill out the FAFSA for me? Definitely, we know parents are involved with the completion of the FAFSA. Students, we'd encourage you to be involved with this process as well. So this is a joint process. Our expectation is that this is an investment that you're making in yourself. So we'd encourage you to sit with mom and be part of the process.
We'll actually get into a little bit more about who can file the FAFSA, what a parent means, all of that information when we get to the parent information. And that's a very good point. Right?
And one of the reasons I thought about it is because these two questions here about high school completion or highest level is about the biological parents. It's the only two questions about the biological for those of you who might be in a divorce separated situation. But everything else, again, Christy makes a great point too. We'll go over this a little bit more in a few minutes.
Biological could also mean adoptive too, so
correct.
Keep that in mind. All right, so on to high school information. So this would be your high school that you are currently attending and are graduating from. what city it's located in, what state it's located in. This again is a smart application, so as you're entering this information, you'll see at the bottom it'll show up down here a list of high schools that meet what you're entering, and you'll have to select your high school from the list down here. Right here we just have a made up, well, this is actually a real high school, but for our pretend Jane Domer tonight, this is where she's attending. So you'll just want to enter your high school information, select the high school from the list, and then select next. So now it gives you the opportunity to tell where the FAFSA should be going. What colleges and institutions do you want the FAFSA to be sent to? So we're hoping Notre Dame. So obviously Jane Domer is going to Notre Dame or wants her FAFSA to go to Notre Dame. So she's actually done a search. So if you know the school code for the college or institution that you're applying to, or institutions if you have more than one, you can enter the federal school code here. Notre Dame's school code is 001840, 001840. Or if you don't know the school code, that's fine too. You can actually search for it by the school name, city, state, etc., and it'll give you a list just like it did for the high schools. So here we see Notre Dame pops up. You just click the little box and say add, and it'll add Notre Dame, and then Notre Dame is sure to get your information. Same with any other school.
Christy, we've had a number of questions about how many schools they can enter on here as FAFSA. One family said they had 10, one family said they had 12 schools. What should they do? What's the limit here? And what do they do if they can't fit all their schools?
Right. That's a good question. I believe it's 8. Don't quote me on that. It's been a while since I filed the FAFSA, but I do
10. I think I see 10. I barely have enough eyesight to see it.
Very good.
Yes.
Tons are safer. It does say 10 on here, so if you're looking at this screen closely, it's far away from me and little, but it is 10. So if you have by chance more than 10 schools, the only way that you can actually have it sent to more than that would be to take a school off or remove them and then add another school. The key with that is to make sure that the school that you're taking off has already received your FAFSA information, because if not, it disappears.
Which is another one of our questions, how will I know when Notre Dame gets my information? So we might cover that later, or if you want to answer that now, Christy, that would be great.
Unfortunately, we don't automatically send you a notification that we've received your FAFSA. You're more than welcome to contact our office by phone or by email, and we're happy to check for you to make sure that we have your record.
And typically, again, I'm sure Christy's going to cover this in a little bit, but you'll receive an output document from the federal government. If you receive your student aid report, which will typically come via email, you pretty much can be assured that the schools on that report have received the FAFSA output documents. I'd suggest you review that and make sure that you didn't mistype any of the schools, so that the information has really gone to the schools to which you intended it to go to.
Mm-hmm. All right, moving along. Oh boy, that's really tiny. Hopefully you guys can see this. There should be about 13 or so questions, give or take, that are listed here that you'll need to read very carefully. Basically, these questions are used by the Department of Ed to determine your dependency status. So whether or not you are dependent upon, or dependents of your parents, basically is what it's looking at. So that the FAFSA knows whether or not you need to provide parent information as you're completing it. So you'll go through, I'm not going to read through these, but basically it's asking, do you have dependents of your own? Were you born before a certain date? Are you a veteran? So there's lots of different options in terms of what the FAFSA is looking at to determine dependency status, but likely most of you will answer no to all of these questions.
If any of our listeners do have special circumstances and you think that you're an independent student, what I would invite you to do is to write our office, and again, we'll give you some contact information later, and explain your circumstances, and one of our administrators will get back with you about what you would need to do. So we won't go into detail about that tonight.
All right, so our Jane Domer answered no to all of those questions, so FAFSA decided that she's a dependent of her parent. So it's going to ask her to submit parent information in addition to her own financial information. So you'll see now in the FAFSA, the color changes and the bar on the side changes as well. So instead of student, it says parent, and instead of dark blue, we have purple. So hopefully that's a good indicator.
Yes.
And you guys will notice that as you're going through as well, when that switches and when you should be providing parent information versus the student information. So it does ask for your parents' marital status, and this is kind of where Mary was alluding to earlier regarding who your parents are and who you're required to use, or whose information you're required to provide on the FAFSA. So Jane Domer's parents are married or remarried, so that's pretty basic. However, the FAFSA does ask questions like, are they single? Are they, I'm trying to remember some of the other things. Help me out, Mary. What was the new status that they just added last year?
There's a new status of parent or adults who are living together. So it would be
What it was.
perhaps it's a couple that you're in a state where there's specific laws on who can get married. So, but if there are two adults who are clearly serving as the parents and are supporting that household, then both of those individuals need to be listed on the FAFSA.
So basically, it's both legal parents if they live together, regardless of their marital status. So if both of your legal parents are living in the same household, then you need to provide that information, regardless of if they're married or not.
Mm-hmm.
Also, information in the household would be you and any other dependents of your parents. So at the very bottom of the screen, you'll see household size. We see Jane Domer's household is 4. So there's 2 parents in her household and probably a sibling. And then anyone who's currently in college that's a dependent of your parents would be listed as someone in college. So for this example, Jane Domer is the only one that will be attending college next year. Her sibling is not, so either younger or older. There's 4 in the household with 1 in college.
Christy, we've had a couple of questions about what about if I don't know if my sibling is going to go to college, what should I put? With graduate students, with a parent in college, so we've had a couple of questions come through about that. What would be your advice there?
Yeah, so it's hard if you don't know if they're going to go, but I would say educated guess, or the best answer that you have at the time. You can always go back in and change that information or contact your school, whichever college that you end up deciding on at a later date, to change that information and let them know something's different than what you originally filed. In terms of graduate students, if they're in a degree-seeking program, technically they are considered in college for the FAFSA. The profile, I believe, is a little bit different. Does that follow the question?
Parents in college.
Parents in college. Parents are not considered as a member of the household in college because they technically file their own FAFSA as an independent student. So for that particular example, it's just dependents of the parents that are considered to be in college.
And the one thing I'll say, know that the number in college is a major factor in terms of financial aid eligibility. And so what I would say is be cautious. If you really don't think that the student is going to go on to college, then I would not report them. I would rather err on the side of giving you a decision with the one in college than taking money away because you call us and you say, we only have one in college. So just know that is a major factor in terms of the determination. So, and we can cover that a little bit more as we move through as well.
All right, so let's move on. Okay, so now it's going to start asking your parents about their financial information that would typically come from their tax return. The federal government actually the Department of Ed has created a partnership with the IRS actually in the last few years, which allows the parents to pull their data from the IRS into the FAFSA. So instead of having to go in and put all of their information from their tax returns line by line into the FAFSA, they can use what's called the IRS Data Retrieval Tool, or DRT. You might hear some schools call it that. Mm-hmm. We have our own financial aid language. If you're not familiar with now, you might be soon. But students and parents both can utilize this tool, but there is a few qualifiers on that. So if the parents have filed their tax return electronically within the last 3 weeks, you may not be able to use it, so you might have to wait until kind of that 3-week cutoff before you're able to pull your information in. If you filed paper within the last 11 weeks, you'll have to wait till after that 11 weeks to pull it in. That doesn't mean that you can't go ahead and complete your FAFSA. It just means that you have to go in later and use the data retrieval tool after that kind of breaking point.
So we did have some people who joined a little bit later, and what Christy just said again, February 15th is our priority date for submission. It's not a deadline, it's not a cutoff. If you're after February 15th, it doesn't mean you'll get less financial aid. We complete financial aid notifications in the order which we receive the applications. So we would prefer to have the actual information, but again, please go ahead, fill it out with estimated income information. If, again, as Christy just said, you're doing it electronically, go back in within about 3 weeks and try and use the data retrieval tool and pull over for us your actual information into the FAFSA. We'll talk about the profile as a whole different thing. You're not going to do updates to the profile. We'll do that for you.
Just a few quick notes here. You'll notice on the screen, if you can see it, there's a few instances where you're not able, as a parent or student, to use the data retrieval tool, and that would be, for example, if you were filing an amended return for some reason, or if your parents were married filing separately, or there's a few others. But in general, most families should be able to use this tool, and it actually makes it very quick and easy and helps with the processing on our end too, because when we receive your records, we know that it's correct data that we're getting because it's coming right from the IRS and what you filed with your tax return. Just another couple of quick notes about the IRS data retrieval tool. Again, if you would like to YouTube, there's a really handy YouTube video out there. IRS data retrieval tool is what you need to use, and it'll walk you through exactly what it is, exactly how to use it. So I encourage you, if you're curious or want some additional information, to go out there. It's actually real time. So again, if you're pulling this information from the IRS, it's whatever you've submitted at that point, and it comes right into your FAFSA application. The IRS will authenticate your the taxpayer's identity. So basically, it's whoever is the tax filer. So for example, if your parents are married and they're filing jointly, and your father was the tax filer, quote unquote, his information is the one that you should be using to use the data retrieval tool. So don't try to put your mom's in, or they won't match and you won't be able to.
So it's whoever on the first line of the tax return is
exactly
who is the taxpayer's identity. Even both may be paying taxes. That's who they're talking about, is whoever's on the first line of the return.
Absolutely. And then also, you have the option of choosing whether or not you want the data actually to come into the FAFSA. So if you're deciding that you want to use the tool, you go out there, you see the information, you'll see the IRS information that would come into the FAFSA. It'll ask you, do you want to pull this in or use the data retrieval tool to pull it in? And you have to tell it yes. Otherwise, it will not come over.
And we have a lot of instances where families go over, they see it, but they fail to submit, upload it, or yes, do this. So make sure you actually do the yes, put it over there and transfer it for my data.
That's a key step. All right, so when the data comes back, it should look very similar to what you see on the screen. If you didn't use the data retrieval tool, you can still enter your information, especially like if you're using estimates or you haven't filed your tax return or it's in that 3-week window, you can go ahead and enter the information yourself. And it's just asking for a few things. So it's asking for adjusted gross income, which you can find on your parents' tax return, and then your parents' earned income, which is typically W-2 wages that you see. And then
that income estimator is actually a live button. Again, if you're a family who has 2 wage earners or 1 wage earner, usually it's your W-2. You can look at your prior year tax return. If it's going to be relatively the same, use that. If you have a more complex situation, I'd say then use the income estimator. But many families have their W-2, maybe some interest income, and you can just add those things together to use it as an estimate.
Yeah. Next, it's going to ask information about the parents' taxes paid. So you'll find that on the tax return as well. How many exemptions that they filed, and then also some other untaxed income type things. So whether or not you had a lifetime learning tax credit, whether or not your parents paid child support. So kind of read through those. If you click on any of these items, it'll actually bring up a box that you enter the value for whatever it is that you're looking at.
So we did have some questions about child support paid. So if you are the custodial parent, and let's say you're in the custodial household, but you are paying child support out for a child who does not live with you from a different relationship, then that would be child support paid. Then there's also a question about untaxed income, which we haven't gotten to yet, that would say child support coming in, received. So the next slide, I think, actually talks about sources of untaxed income that you might have, and we'll go over that. And again, there's been some questions about, can you tell me what kinds of untaxed income? So the next slide will show some of the more common untaxed income that's received.
Yeah, so in our example here, we can see that Jane Domer's parents actually contributed to a retirement plan. So again, you would see this information typically on your W-2, and that number they included here. Then you can also see some of the other types of untaxed income that it's going to ask about. The child support received, which is what Mary just talked about, is here. Tax-exempt interest income, again, coming from your tax return. Untaxed portion of pension distributions or IRA distributions, those are all untaxed income as well. So each one of these, if you were to click on it, you would see it open up just like this with some additional instructions. And then keep in mind that box on the right-hand side that gives you helpful hints as well. Down here at the bottom, it asks just a couple of quick questions about your parents' assets. And actually, this is kind of where some of the smart application process comes into play as well, because it actually knows, based on the information that your parents have already added about their income, that if they kind of the threshold for assets, whether or not they're going to ask your parents for them or not. So in Jane Domer's case, we can see that it is asking if her parents have more than $25,100 in assets, meaning cash, savings, checking, other real estate, those type of any other type of investments that are non-retirement, and also not your home. Home would not be included in that as well.
So one of the things that we hear a lot of concern about is reporting of assets, and people are worried that we're going, if you saved or you have some assets, that you are really worried that we're going to ask for 100% of those assets, or it's going to penalize you somehow in the process. So as the formula, we also had a question about, there's a quirky question about the age of the oldest parent, and why is that asked? Because assets are protected within the process. So you need to write in, what are your assets as of today? Assets are not changeable on the FAFSA. It's what are the assets worth as of today? But what the formula does behind the scene is the formula protects a portion of the assets that are reported before there's even any consideration of those assets. So the average age of parents who have children going to college, believe it or not, maybe you're older, maybe you're younger, is about 44. And the asset protection at that age in the federal side of the formula is $38,000. So again, if in this case, this family has $37,000 in other real estate, cash, and investments, they wouldn't even have a contribution from these assets. So again, it's much better if you have assets and you have the ability to do paying rather than borrowing. So that's really a myth that assets are a bad thing to have.
Definitely gives you more choice.
Yes, it
than
does.
a family that doesn't have assets.
Right.
So. All right, so now we flip back to the student. We see the bar changed again, and there's student down the left-hand side, so it's going to ask about the student's income information. As students, especially high school students, maybe you have a part-time job and you didn't earn a whole lot. Maybe you're going to file a tax return, maybe you're not required to based on the amount that you've earned, but it's going to ask you whether or not you are required to file or whether you plan on filing. So Jane didn't earn a whole lot, so she's not going to file this year.
Oh, poor Jane.
Lucky Jane.
So we see she did have a small amount of earnings. She had about $2,100 that she earned at her part-time job. So she does have to report how much she earned, even though she's not planning on filing a tax return. And then it also asks her the same type of questions that it asked the parent. So did she pay child support? Did she receive child support? And then also it asks a little bit of information about any type of assets or investments that Jane might have as well. So we see Jane saved a little bit of that money that she earned at her part-time job. She had about $1,000 in her bank account, so she reports that as well. Oh my gosh, we're done.
Believe it or not. So it wasn't hopefully as painful as you thought.
Yeah, super quick, right? So we're at the end, and that's really all of the questions that you might possibly see. And again, like we said earlier, some of those questions for some of you may not apply and you may never see them. So keep that in mind as well. So at the very end of the application, it's going to ask for the parent signature and the student signature. So remember before when we talked about the PIN being used to sign electronically, so we see it asks for that right here. And it's typically a 4-digit number, so hopefully something that you will be relatively easy to remember from year to year, because a reminder that you will have to have it every year, except for this next year, because they're going to username and password. But for the first half of it, it's asking information about the student. So the social security number, name, all of that automatically populates. You put in your PIN, you read this agreement down here and click agree. And then if you click the sign button, the student has signed the application and that part is done for the student. At the bottom of the page actually is where the parent information is, and it's asking the same type of information. So it automatically populates the parent's information. It asks for the parent's PIN, which again, keep in mind the parents use the same PIN regardless of whether or not they're filing for 2 or 3 kids or however many kids they might have in college. They'll use the same PIN for everyone. Every student has their own individual PIN.
So Christy, we have a question about how do I get a new PIN for my incoming freshman?
New PIN for incoming freshmen. So going back to one of our very first slides, which the slides will be available, I believe, later on, the PIN website is where you apply for the PIN. So it's pin.ed.gov, and the student can go in and apply for a PIN. It takes about 2.5 minutes, so very quick. Sorry.
And I was going to say, just to clarify, I did see one question where a parent had a sophomore and an incoming freshman. There are 2 separate PINs.
For the students, right? Because this is a student's application, so each student has a separate PIN, but the parent has one PIN because their identity remains the same. It's the student who has. So it is a little bit confusing from that perspective, but great question on that. Christy, we've had a couple of questions. Do I have to wait until February 15th to file my FAFSA? So maybe let's review again the question about estimated income, and then how do I update my information if I've already done. So it looks like some of you way to go, have already done your FAFSA and you're wanting to know how to update. So we covered this a little bit, but what if I did it in January? What do I do now?
So the FAFSA actually became available and live January 1st. So you early beavers out there could, eager beavers, could start filing your FAFSA on January 1st. But if you didn't, that's fine. You still have plenty of time. Like Mary said, or like we said earlier also, February 15th is our priority submission date. If you don't have your tax information, that's totally okay. You can still file with estimated information. Sometimes that's a little intimidating for families. Feel free to use your prior year tax return if you'd like, because then you can go straight down the tax return and line up the line items as you're going through the FAFSA. That's probably the easiest way, unless you're an accountant and you want to estimate your information, that's fine too. You can do that also.
And just to clarify, priority deadline means just the first deadline, but it means that you can get it in beforehand and then continue on after that as well, right?
For Notre Dame, it's not a hard, fast deadline. It's a priority submission date, which is really helpful to us because the sooner we get your information, the sooner that we can work on it, and then the sooner we can turn around and send a financial aid notification back to you. So for us, it's helpful to have it sooner rather than later. Obviously, it's not going to penalize you, though, if you're not able to get it in by the 15th, but we're really encouraging that just more for our benefit because it helps us to get the information earlier. So
we've had a couple of questions about age of the degree completion of the parents, those two questions that are much earlier on in the FAFSA. Again, that's not data that's going to be used in a calculation. Only some state grant programs typically are using that information about first generation. If your parents were born in a different country, that doesn't affect your financial aid in any way. So don't fret over that question too much because it's really not used in the calculation. It looks like we had some folks who joined us late who are asking about the limitation of the 10 schools. So maybe, Christy, you can answer that question, give that information again.
Sure. So the FAFSA allows you to select up to 10 schools to have your information sent to. So we hope Notre Dame is one of them. But if by chance you have more than 10 schools, it's not a problem, but you can't just go in and add one without taking one out. So you'll have to remove one or two or however many schools you need beyond that 10 in order to have your information sent to the school. Please, though, before you remove that information, make sure you check with the school that you are removing to make sure or ensure that they have your information already so that it doesn't just vanish into the atmosphere somewhere. So wrapping up on the FAFSA here, the very last thing you want to do is make sure you hit the submit button. If you don't hit the submit button, it doesn't go. So make sure you remember to hit submit at the bottom. And then after you do that, you'll actually get your confirmation page, which looks something like this. You should see congratulations at the top. I know it says congratulations, Larry. There's a long story why it says congratulations, Larry, and not congratulations, Jane. But anyway, just ignore that part. But it'll congratulate you on the completion of your FAFSA. Mary's laughing at me. It'll also give you some helpful information about all of the schools that you're having your FAFSA sent to. So you can see Notre Dame's graduation rate, retention rate, turnover rate, etc. So maybe that would be helpful information for you as you're going through. You'll also see your expected family contribution, which if your information is estimated, it may not be 100% accurate. Keep that in mind. And
that's not your bill.
True.
Just know that too. We're not going to go through that tonight, but that's not your bill.
Correct. So you'll get this. You'll also receive what's called a student aid report, or SAR, as Mary had mentioned earlier, which is kind of your confirmation. You have this page, but then you also get the student aid report as well.
Important for you as parents to know that the results are going to go to the student. So one of the things that I'm a parent of two young people who completed college, and what I learned about them was they weren't always as interested in receiving financial aid information as I might have been. So what we agreed to was a financial aid, an email account, a Yahoo, Gmail, whatever it is that you use. Get a second account that you can use just for college information. And so that way I didn't have to ask either of my daughters about, did you get this from the Department of Education? We didn't miss any notifications or whatever. If we got admissions, acceptance letters or anything like that, that was for her to open. So I knew she would be looking for those things. I didn't open those, but I did. I was much more interested in the results of this kind of information or requests for additional information. So perhaps a tip that will help you. If you've already done the FAFSA, I think it is a change of field that you can do. Notre Dame, we're going to communicate with your student as well. So it is important, and we're going to use, until they are admitted, right? The email that they put on their admissions application. After a certain point in time, we're going to start to use their Notre Dame email account. They'll get notification of that when we start to use it. I guess it's actually a little bit further down in the process. But
Usually like May or June.
May or June, we'll start to use a Notre Dame email for those students who have told us they're going to come to admit to Notre Dame. So we're ready to move, huh?
Moving on.
Moving on. The CSS financial aid profile, and since Christy's so good at this, I may have to do this, I'm not sure. One of the things I want to just give an overview of is some questions have come in, some people wonder why. Why does Notre Dame, why do some schools use 2 financial aid applications? Well, just like an admission application has a lot of questions, an admissions application tells the story of a young person that we've never met. The financial aid application, the FAFSA, doesn't tell much of a story. It tells us how many people are in a household. It gives us an adjusted gross income. It may or may not, it will tell us about marital status, but there's really not much of a story. So some family might earn $60,000 and another family might earn $60,000. But when we start to really break into the information, we learn that maybe one of those families has someone who's really ill. Maybe someone has, they're paying tuition, private school tuition for someone else. So not all families are just about a bottom line on a tax return. So we choose to use the CSS financial aid profile because it tells a story, a much better story. So as you see, as we come through this, you're going to see that we can see much more robust data. Having more robust data doesn't mean necessarily that we're digging for gold, right? So we hear that one sometimes as well, that this is a barrier, why do I need to complete this? The reality is, nationally, 44% of the time, families who complete a profile actually have a lower family contribution on the CSS profile application than they do on the FAFSA. So I know some of you ask, do I really need to fill out the profile? If you want consideration for university scholarship assistance that's need-based, yes, you do. And again, it tells a much better story about what's happening with your family. Neither form is a cash flow analysis. They are to give us a story about what kind of resources that you have or don't have. So again, we'll look at things like retirement assets. It informs us of a bigger picture. We don't assess those assets, but it helps us to understand if you're 60 years old and you have no retirement assets, it tells us something different about your ability to finance your child's education. So that's why we use the profile, because it does have more robust data. Hopefully, again, you're going to find it's a smart application, so you don't get every question, but just like Christy mentioned when we were going through the FAFSA, you're not going to be presented with all of these questions that we're going to show you tonight. It's going to be a SMART application. I'll let Christy click here because then we don't have to fight over the mouse.
Left-handed.
Left-handed. So you'll notice on the slide here, it says sign up. So if you don't have a College Board account, so the CSS profile, so most of you would know College Board for the SAT or maybe AP or PSAT. The CSS profile is actually another major piece of the College Board. So if you have an SAT account, you should have a College Board account already, and your username and password should work here. So I would try that here first, sign in with that. If you never took the SAT, perhaps you took the ACT, then you're going to have to sign up and give some additional information, and then you'll be able to enter the profile application. So very important, as Christy mentioned earlier, we're in a point in time right now where the 14-15 applications in some of the applications, like the FAFSA, is still up. Same, some of you who completed the profile earlier, the 14-15 profile was still up. We're showing you the 15-16, but I know if you're listening tonight, you'll get a call from us tomorrow. One of you has filled out a 14-15, and you're an early action, restricted action admitted student. And so we will call you because we happen to notice the data come in today and notice that you were a brand new student. So make sure, like Christy talked about, the FAFSA.com. Don't go to that site. You want FAFSA.org. You also want to be on the profile site, and you also want to make sure you're in the correct academic year. So again, you would register. So in this registration process, what you're doing, let's go to the next slide. Okay. And even the next one. These are just questions. That last one was just kind of the special help information. And again, hopefully will help you as we go. You're going to do this registration process, and in this registration process, it's going to ask a series of questions that helps the College Board build the SMART application. So again, you only get presented with the information that would be appropriate to you. So if your parents are married, it won't ask you about a divorce separation questions. If you say that you don't own a business, it's not going to ask you the business questions that are here. Next slide.
I'm multitasking.
That's okay. So you see here, again, we're looking at basic student information. There's nothing really outstanding here. Again, this is student social security number. So as I commented on the FAFSA, make sure this is the student, not the parent information. Same thing with student birth date.
Just a reminder, too, that the profile, just like the FAFSA, is a secure site. So that's one of the reasons why you register, you create a username and password that you'll want to keep protected so that no one else can use it. Don't share with your parents, even though you probably will. Yeah. We hear that a lot. Can I share my password with my mom?
Quick question. Do you have a family CSS profile, or is there a CSS profile per child?
That's a great question. So I will answer that. As we're working, the College Board, so that's a whole different story, but the College Board is working on a family profile. At this time, there is not a family profile. So it would be just like the FAFSA. You have a profile for each student. Okay. The good thing is you'll have already done the parent information. Hopefully by next year, is what I understand from the College Board, you'll be able to have information move from one application to the next, so it won't be quite as much information to fill in for each child.
Mary, I saw you talked a little bit earlier on the profile about this being for need-based scholarships. Yeah. And I saw that someone is asking about merit-based scholarships. Do they need to file the profile in the FAFSA to qualify for merit-based scholarships?
You don't have to. That's a great question, so thank you to whomever asked that question. No, you don't have to file the FAFSA or profile if all you're looking for is merit-based aid. With that caveat said, I would say we strongly encourage you to complete both the FAFSA and the profile. One of the reasons is I think many times families are very surprised that they qualify for aid. So hopefully you've been getting a series of emails from me. Actually, your student has been getting them. So you're here tonight. There's quite a few of you on this webinar, so hopefully you have seen a series of emails from me. There's also the last email prior to this one talked about the average aid by income band. So again, I think some families are really surprised that families who earn in the six figures receive need-based aid at the university. I think the other reason to file is, unfortunately, family circumstances change. And I know, particularly, I've seen quite a few questions about, I'm going to retire, I can't report, where on the FAFSA do I report medical expenses, those kinds of things. My income, I got a one-time bonus, or I had an inheritance. There's nowhere on the FAFSA to do that, so the profile is the means to do that. So again, we would really encourage families to complete the financial aid application process, but certainly it is not required for merit aid, or even if the student just wants to work on campus, it's not required for that either. So here is we're just continuing in terms of the registration process, building the application. And again, here we're looking at things about very similar to the FAFSA questions about, are you a veteran? Are you a first-year student? Do you have legal dependents? So again, this application is building just like the FAFSA did. Again, as Christy mentioned in her section on the FAFSA, we're building probably a dependent student application that's going to require parent information. But that's what this series of questions is about. So very similar again to the profile. This is where you're going to be listing the school or schools that you want to send the profile to. Know that the CSS profile is also used for some scholarship programs. So you might want to take a look at scholarship programs in your area or some of the national scholarship programs, because they may require the CSS profile as well to be considered for their information. So Notre Dame's school code is 1841. The irony is 001840 is our FAFSA code. 1841 is our CSS profile code. So this is where you would enter that. You can either search or you can put the information right there, the 1841. And then it should come up. It should say, if you put in 1841, I am not as clever as Christy, so I have College of Sample rather than University of Notre Dame. And I have no Jane, but we'll assume Jane is still doing this, and Larry won't come up at the end. So here is information still in the registration section. So again, the profile is still building your application here. So this is where we're asking about marital status of the parent. Are you in a domestic partnership? Did you complete your tax return? Did you estimate? What kind of information? So again, you see question 18, how many businesses? Well, if you have 0, again, when we get to the actual application, no question about businesses should appear. And there's a question, what student's parents' housing status? Well, this one says, I own a home. So there's a drop down there. If you rent, you'll say rent, and then the application won't ask you any questions about home ownership.
Also, just a quick note, the country of origin.
Mm-hmm.
So Notre Dame does use something called the international profile. So if you're an international student who's applying to admission at Notre Dame and is required to do the profile for aid consideration, you would basically be filing the same application, and your country of origin determines what questions you're going to get, again following the SMART format.
So I'm just going to answer because I caught my eye caught a question here about, do we do the CSS profile every year or just this year? If you want consideration annually for university need-based scholarship, you would do both the FAFSA and the profile annually. So here, this really is just a summary of the information that you have told the College Board, and this is what the application that you will be completing is built on. Here you'll see you'll get a confirmation number. So Jonathan, crispy board.
Wow.
Someone at the board is quite clever. And they have a CSS ID. We don't use the CSS ID for much, but you'll see a little bit where that CSS ID might come up in terms of the IDOC service. So then you'll see that you will get question, I'm still...
Could I go too far?
Yes,
Sorry.
that's okay. You can actually do a worksheet so you kind of know what's coming, and or you can get applications, or if you're like me, I just kind of start and then read the instructions as I go, and there are instructions in the as you go form, but if you're one who likes to read through everything, you might want to print those in advance. So you would want to start the profile application by clicking that big button at the bottom. So this is really just about navigation, completing the application. Again, I'm not going to go through this. The slides will be posted later, so you'll be able to see it. You'll notice at the top bar, it shows you where you are in the application process. You can actually skip around in the profile, so you'll see, Christy, if you can go to that drop down underneath, right above the PD. There's a drop down there and it says select section. So maybe you're ready to do the parent asset section, but you don't have the information for the parent data section that we're in right now. You can skip around, you can save the application, and you can come back to it later. As you'll notice off to the right, there are help codes. That's another way to say this is information. You'll notice that they're kind of numbered oddly, right? And it says PD. It tells you what section you are in. So that's a helpline for parent data. So parents' data is up at the top, and then it says PD. And over to the right, it says PD 100, question 100. And then it jumps to question 105. The reason the College Board has done that is because, again, you're doing a smart application, and you're not going to get every question. And so they didn't want families to be really confused by not having them go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So know that when you call in, like to a helpline to the College Board, if you're stuck on a question and the help button doesn't help you, they're going to ask you what section you're in. So these, again, are pretty basic questions about parent data. And I don't think there's anything majorly outstanding here that would really trip anyone up. Parent household information, theoretically, this should match what you put on the FAFSA. So how many people are in the household, and how many of those people in that household, not parents, will be in a degree-seeking program for the upcoming academic year. It's not asking about the prior year. It's asking July 1, 2015 through June 30, 2016. And so you're going to answer about that. And then there's a parent email address. Those are really important for us. You don't have to put that in, but I know as a counselor myself who reads this information, if I have a quick question, I'm probably going to run over to your FAFSA data or to here and pick up that parent email address and send you a quick note so I can continue with the application. You'll see the next series. Can you jump back, Christy? That's okay. The next series of questions are asking you about needs-tested benefits. So those are things like SSI or WIC, so a food program, food stamps program. So if you answer any of these, if you are receiving those benefits, your application actually would finish here if you answer yes to any of these questions. And it would jump to the end, and the application would tell you that you do not have to have a, there's no fee for you. So there's an automated fee waiver that is embedded within the CSS profile application, and it's based on answers as you go along. So you'll be told at the end of your application whether or not you qualified for a fee waiver. So here we are in a parent's benefits, income and benefits section. So what you're going to notice that's different from on the profile than it is on the FAFSA is here we're in 2014, same as we were in the FAFSA. So we're applying for 15-16. The year that's been just completed is what we would call the base year information. You'll notice on the profile, though, there's going to be a section about tell us about your actual income information from 2013 and estimate for us your 2015 information. And this is where I said there's much more robust data sets in here. And so we can see, and particularly in the last number of years, it's been very helpful for us to be able to see families who have had major shifts in income because of unemployment or things like that. So, or as Christy mentioned before, things like one-time non-reoccurring income. We'll be able to see that information here so that you don't have to write all these kinds of letters that you might have to write to a school that doesn't use something like the profile. So again, on this, we are looking for the same types of information that we asked on the FAFSA. The adjusted gross income, parent wages, tax information, education credits. And again, what you'll see right at the end of each question is it directs you specifically to a line on the tax return. Again, as we mentioned with the FAFSA, if you don't have your 2014 tax return, then you should use last year to as a guide and or estimate what you think your application or your information is going to be. The FAFSA, as Christy said, you can go back and you can use the data retrieval tool. The profile does not have a way for you to go back and update the information. That's purposeful because you're going to be sending tax information to us. We're going to update your profile information. Unless you have made a major error in assets, in reporting assets, like added another zero or something like that, there's no reason for you to cross out, make a photocopy of the application and cross out and put your actual income information. We're going to do that for you. So save your time, save your paper, and your postage stamp. Again, wow, those are really small up there, and they're really small on my paper here too.
I think we can actually zoom in a little bit. Can I see the cursor? I think I can. Need a mouse.
But I think that we are still in parent data section, and so
Maybe not.
you can probably see it better on your screen, but we are still in parent information, and some of this is untaxed income. There we go. Thank you. And so I know there have been a number of questions about untaxed income. So again, here are some of the most common, probably the most common that we see is the contribution to a 401k, 403b, or a 459, which all we're asking here is look in box 12 on your W-2 form, and if there is a letter D, E, or G, right in that number that's in next to that code. Those are the payments to a tax-deferred pension. We're not, that has to be reported on both the FAFSA and on the profile. I didn't know if you had a comment. The other probably most frequent that we see is the tuition and fee deduction. We see a lot. Again, that is on page 1 of your tax return. If you had, and that's going to be if you had other children in college, IRA contributions, or if you're self-employed, KEHO contributions. That's really hard to say. So those are the kinds of things. I know someone very early on asked about health savings contributions. You see here that I think it's, I just lost my space there. It's I think it's 203A or something like that. So that's where you would enter the information about the health savings accounts. So again, you need to read through all these. Some of these, again, you're not going to get presented because of the application. That registration process is going to eliminate some of these questions. So it's not going to be, hopefully, as daunting as what this might look like to you right now. So here's exactly what I was saying earlier. So now we're in section PP, parents prior, right? So now we are in parents prior year, 2013. So you've already had done your, hopefully you had already completed your tax returns for 2013. So they're literally asking, tell us what your adjusted gross income was there, what were your taxes paid, and your untaxed income. Again, quick note, taxes paid, probably one of the most frequent errors is people take the withholding from their W-2, both on the FAFSA and on the profile. It's not the amount withheld, it's the amount of tax paid or tax owed. And so again, it's referring, as you'll note at the end of that question, to the actual line item on the 1040. We're going to base the decision on 2014. We are going to look at this information, though, to see if there are changes. If there are changes, you'll see shortly that there's a section to explain, and it may be that we will write to you or ask you for some additional information if we really see shifts in the income information as we're reviewing. So here, PF, parent future income. So what do we think is going to happen? And this is your best guess, right? So we're not going to use this as the base information. So again, please don't fret over this. Try and just make your best estimate. So I say it's actual, perhaps estimated 2014, perhaps actual 2014, and best guess 2015. So again, this is only giving us, we're building the picture here. So hopefully you can see this is how we build the picture of the ebbs and flows in a family's financial circumstances. PA, parent assets questions. So again, you're not going to be presented necessarily with all of this information, but very similar to the FAFSA, cash, savings, and checking. What's in that balance as of the date you're completing the application? Not tomorrow, not the day before, but as the date you're completing the application. Assets, so this is a different question that's not on the FAFSA application. We ask about parent assets held in sibling names. One of the reasons the College Board did this was a request, and I know someone earlier asked about, is Notre Dame a 568 school? To many of you, you would have no idea what that is, so kudos to whomever asked that question. 568 is actually a section of the law, and what that means is the schools who participate in the 568 group of schools are schools that are need blind and need 100% need. And all we're doing is talking to each other about the types of information that would be helpful for us to find out from a family. And policies so that we have a common approach. And one of the things we often heard from parents was, gosh, I wish I knew I shouldn't have saved in my child's name, or whatever, right? The point is, we hope you save for your child's education. We don't care where you saved, just save for your child's education. And so we put this all together, and then we protect those savings that you might have for younger children as well. So again, another reason we use the profile is it's a very, very different philosophy. Again, you can see by the data set of questions that we're asking, the what I call the market basket, the idea, the philosophy behind it is based on current consumer economic indices versus the FAFSA is based on very old data from the 50s from the Bureau of Labor Statistics that's just been kind of updated. So if we think about what was in the market basket, there were no cell phones, there was no internet, there was no, not everyone had a phone, right? So I'm old enough.
They're probably like, what?
Yeah, ask them about the rotary dial or the car window, right, that rolled up and down, right? So the market basket has really changed, and so the CSS profile and the methodology that runs behind is much more updated to what current economic status or expenditures a family does. So back to the specific questions here, that's why we ask about sibling savings. We're also asking about fair market value of the home. Again, I know I've seen a number of questions that says, well, how do I figure that out? Please don't go and hire somebody to guess or to assess your home or give you a market price. Literally, if you were going to put a sign out on your front lawn that said your house was for sale, what would your asking price be? If you really don't know, there's a website, an example, and we use it called Zillow, like pillow, but with the Z, ZILLOW.com. You type in your address, and it will tell you what the fair market value of your home is. as well as what homes in your area are worth. So that's a great resource to use both for home, or if you have other real estate, you can also use Zillow for that. And Zillow's pretty good. You know your market. Yeah, sometimes there's errors. I've looked up my home before and I say, wow, I hope so, but it's a good way for you to be able to estimate if you really don't know. But again, I work in a pretty common sense world, so I would say if I was going to put a sale sign out of my home, what would I estimate it would be? You see, we also look at mortgage. So what is your current mortgage if you have an active line of home equity, or if you have an active second mortgage, you would be reporting those as well within that information. Other real estate would be, do I have a piece of land somewhere? Do I have rental properties? Do I have a timeshare? Those are what we're looking for in real estate. Some of the information that we often find that is reported correctly on the profile, but not reported correctly on the FAFSA because the questions are asked differently, is real estate and investments. You'll notice here in the parent assets, those questions are asked separately. So what do your parents own in investments? And you give an answer, and if there's debt there, you give us the debt, and we look at the equity. And then there's a real estate question, and then home is separate. On the FAFSA, if you look at that and you're presented with that question, the question really is a combined, and it asks, what is the equity in your investments in real estate? So again, we often find that the correct data is reported on parent assets, but incorrectly reported on the FAFSA. And just because the question I don't think is very clear on the FAFSA, nor are the instructions. So that is that in terms just very quickly about home. Again, we also understand the context of home. So please report your best fair market value guess and the debt. We understand some of you may live in California, or maybe you live in New York. We understand that real estate prices there are different than what real estate prices are in South Bend, Indiana, Evansville, Indiana, I don't know, Brownsville, Illinois, whatever, right? So we understand that there are differences. We also understand some of you held your house longer and have more appreciation. We also have seen a lot of families who've lost equity in their home because of the depreciating, the housing crash. So we really look at homes, so don't be fearful of that. We look at the home and all of these things within the context of the whole picture that we are putting together. So parent business, again, I'm not going to go through this too much because I'm sure that many of you don't have businesses. If you have specific questions about the business information, please write our office and we will have, Christy's a great person. She's our business expert. But
I don't know how to go that way.
But we can help you through that if the help instructions and whatnot don't have information that's that you might have a more detailed scenario. Parent expenses. So again, this is one of the major differences between the FAFSA and the profile is we can collect information from you about those expenses. Again, I know someone earlier asked about where in the FAFSA do I report that I had high medical expenses. You don't. There's no place for it. There is on the profile application. If you're only going to do FAFSA applications, that would be special circumstances, and you would need to write to the actual school and tell them about those medical expenses and see if that's something that they would do anything with. So Notre Dame, we ask for this information right up front. Many of our families have children in private schools, and so we are asking about tuition up front. We ask about medical expenses. Maybe this child is one of the last in college. You have educational debt for yourself because you went back for a second degree, or maybe you have parent educational debt that you took on for a student who graduated earlier than the one who's entering now. So we gather a lot of this information, and we will use this up front in our analysis. Now we go through student data, and again, I know we're getting short on time, so I'm not going to go through these. It's the same kinds of things I said earlier. Look at the line item for the tax return. Same thing here. We're looking at tax information, so, and now we're in the student income and for 2014. We know that sometimes that students earn more in 2014 than they will in 2015. So again, we will look at the 2015 information for the student to see if their income is really going to drop, and we'll use that information automatically. And this is where you would tell us about that 2015. Another key sections on here would be, I think this is the screen where there are outside scholarships, or parents, if you have some kind of educational benefit. Those are important things for us to know up front so that we can prepare the best financial aid notification for you and incorporate that information into your aid notification before we send it. Student assets, again, same as the parents' information. It's as of the date that you're completing the application. Parent family member listing. So this is a little bit more robust than just the household, what's your household size and number in college that you saw in the FAFSA. You're going to be able to tell us a bit about how old the children are, what kind of school they're going to, and the reasons for some of these questions is we actually protect a portion of the parent's income to save for other children who are younger than the student who's going to college, and that's why we need this information. And we also protect, as I mentioned earlier, savings that you have as a family for children's education. Whether that was the purpose it was done, we're still going to protect it. So there's a lot of good information that we receive off of here, and it may not just be children. Perhaps your home includes a parent, a grandparent. Thank you, Christy. A grandparent, or perhaps you have cousins living with you, or whatever. So if parents, you're providing more than half the support for this individual, then you should be including those individuals in the home and sharing the relationship with us, and that will be very helpful to us to consider. I mentioned earlier that there's a special circumstances situation, so you can't write pages and pages here. There is limited of 2,000 characters, but again, if you want to draw our attention to something that you didn't think was presented, or maybe the information was there, maybe we see that income shift because you had one-time income, this is a great place to put that so that you don't have to write a separate letter. And again, we can look at that information right up front, and when you read your financial aid notification from Notre Dame, you'll see that we'll consider that. There will be a special message if we use that information in the decision that we send to you. So Notre Dame, there's a whole bunch of supplemental questions. We use one question, and it is question number 524, and that question says, so maybe you weren't a parent that saved in your name, and you saved in your child's name. We ask a question that says, of the assets reported for the student, how much did the parent save? So what our practice is to then move that over to a parent asset, which is a much more generous treatment than the FAFSA application. This is an application review. I would encourage you to review this, check on it, make sure you have everything right before you click submit. This is where it's going to tell you, did you qualify for a fee waiver or didn't you? So if you list a whole bunch of schools, your charge will be here. You would pay. If you qualified for an automatic fee waiver, then it would tell you here, and you would be ready to submit the application.
Mary, I saw earlier some questions about the fee and how much it is per school. Or per application, so maybe you can... The base fee, I believe, is $25, and the so this one is completed for one school, and so there's a base fee of $25, and then for additional schools or programs, it's $16. For each additional school.
For each additional school. So if you're submitting to 5, you would figure the math, and hopefully the tool that they're charging you with is doing it correctly.
But just reiterating, because it's a SMART application, those on the lower income scale likely could qualify for a fee waiver automatically, and they would see a zero balance here.
Exactly. So that's a great point, Christy. So what we would ask before you call us and ask for a fee waiver, if you are a lower income student, please come this far in the application to see if you did an automatic. There are only so many fee waivers that you can qualify for. So the College Board does have a limitation, but they actually are quite generous in the number that they will offer. So, but please come this far rather than asking for the fee waiver on the upfront, which is what you do for the SAT. So for some students, it's really confusing because for the profile, it's on the back end. So great question. This is, again, just confirms that your application was submitted. Please, please, please make sure that you get this screen because, again, similar to the FAFSA, we have families who never hit the actual submit button. So they swear they did the application, and then we realize, or you would be able to go back in and you'll see, oh, I never hit the submit button. That's why they don't have it, and that's why I haven't heard. So again, this is just another summary. I want to be able to get to IDOC, and so I know we're running out of time here. Both of our school codes, we talked about that before.
Mary, before we jump on, I've seen a lot of questions about custodial, non-custodial parent. So I know we talked briefly about the custodial parent's household being who's filling out the profile in the FAFSA. But Notre Dame also uses the non-custodial profile, and if you were on our website already, then you may have seen that. So by chance, can you just speak briefly about what that is and who should be filling out what?
Sure. And Chaton, I know we're supposed to end at 8:30.
We can go a little bit over. That won't stop.
Okay, it won't stop. So if you want to stay with us, we're happy to do. We're trying to go fast.
We know there's a lot of questions too, so
and we'd like to get to those, and we'd like to walk you through the IDOC process. But we know this custodial, non-custodial is a big point. So number one, we would ask that you try to ask the non-custodial parent to complete it. We know we're not trying to start disagreement or war within the household, but so we know that there are tense situations with divorced and separated families, but we do ask that you try and have that non-custodial parent complete the form. What will happen once the profile is submitted, the student will actually receive an email that suggests or asks them to send it on to their non-custodial parent, and that non-custodial parent will receive a temporary login. When they go into the application, it will be their application. They will change their password and they will complete their application. These are firewalled from each other. That non-custodial parent cannot get into the custodial parent or vice versa. And our office would not release information from either of those applications to either parent nor the student. This is parent data. The parent owns the data, and we recognize the sensitivity in general about the information that you are supplying to us, and want to assure you that we hold it in great confidence and hope that you trust us with this information because we understand how sensitive it is. In terms of completion of, if you are not able to complete the non-custodial, if you just cannot get that information, or perhaps the non-custodial parent is not available. Not available. Sometimes we know the parent hasn't been part of the child's life since the child was born or pre-birth. Sometimes a parent is incarcerated. Sometimes the parent, maybe that biological parent is now deceased, but you answered the question that you were divorced because you were divorced from that parent. So there's a lot of reasons. Again, we want to be reasonable with our requests, so that would be something we'd ask that you write. We have contact information, but our general email is FINAID, like financial aid, but shortened, FINAID @nd.edu. And we will take into consideration that information, and then we'll give you the next steps if that's where you're in. We don't want you to choose not to apply for financial aid because you have concerns about non-custodial information.
Thanks, Mary.
Sure, thank you.
Do you want me to talk for a bit?
Sure.
give Mary a little break. She's been talking for a while here. So we just wanted to briefly touch on what IDOC is, because we had talked about that at the beginning. And IDOC is basically a document collection service through the College Board, similar to how the profile is a College Board product as well. And Notre Dame and other schools like Notre Dame choose to use IDOC to collect all of the information that we are asking the families for. So things such as tax returns, W-2s, etc. So basically, when you fill out the profile application, you will get an email. The student will get an email to the email address that they provide on the profile. Those emails started going out at the beginning of February, actually this week. So some of you who are eager and already had your profiles in may have already started receiving these emails instructing you that Notre Dame is asking you to complete the IDOC process and submit information through IDOC, whether it's paper or whether it's uploading information through the IDOC portal. So you'll receive this email. It'll actually instruct you to go out to idoc.collegeboard.org in order to log in using your information that was provided in the email. If you lose the email or forget the information that they provided you, your IDOC ID, you can actually log in with your Social Security number and your birth date. So there's always a way that you can get in. Don't worry. So again, we're strongly encouraging you to submit all of the information in one fell swoop. So whether, again, it's printing off paper and putting it in the mail and sending it off, or whether it's uploading it right from the website, you can do that as well, which makes it quick and easy. Either way, we're just hopeful that you'll get the information to us so that we're able to complete your financial aid notification. So you log into IDOC, it looks something like this on the home page when you land on it. You can just click on the little IDOC button on the bottom. And this is where you see that you'll have an IDOC ID, which comes in the email that you'll get. But if you lose the email or forget your IDOC ID, you can log in using your Social Security number and your birth date.
And then you do have to check the box that says, I have read, or it's going to give you an error message.
Even if you haven't read it, you can still check it.
Or click on it and read it, and then check the box.
Either way. And when you come in, you'll automatically see the information. Now you'll see there's no student information listed here because we didn't want to.
This was a real person.
This is a real person, so we don't want all that information out there. But you'll see that you should be able to see that it's the applicant, which would be the student's name, and then the primary household information, which is typically the custodial parent information. And then you'll also see the information that Notre Dame and other schools like Notre Dame may be requesting. So you'll see institution requesting 1841. We know that's our school code, Notre Dame. So that means Notre Dame is asking for all of this information. And actually, if you click on...
these are pictures, so we can't click on anything.
This is a picture, so you can't see it. But basically, it'll bring up the information that you need, and it shows that it's required in order to complete your application. It also has a little upload button down here, which means that if you have electronic images, which is actually a great new feature this year.
First year.
Before this year, you actually had to print off everything, put it in a paper packet, and mail it off. So this is a great new functionality that College Board is allowing students to upload documents, which should make it very, very easy for you to get your information to us, hopefully.
And again, the upload is going to the College Board servicer, who then will send us this information. And the reason IDOC exists is because Notre Dame overlaps with many admissions from other institutions. So again, maybe you're applying to Notre Dame, Vanderbilt, Northwestern, whatever, a lot of private institutions. We all use IDOC, and the reason we chose to do this is so that families didn't have to send all of these documents to each of those institutions. There's one central collection place that then is uploaded into a secure file, and then we bring it over into each of our individual institution systems. So hopefully it saves you both time as well as money in terms of photocopying and everything.
Right.
And you can see the status of the document if College Board has received it. It takes usually 2 to 3 days, sometimes in peak times 3 to 4 days for us to get the information. If you come here and it says that they have sent it off, you can be pretty assured that we have it, and we work on a rolling basis moving through applications for admitted students.
Mary, you put this together.
This is just, this is instructions on, if you would have clicked that upload button, this is what will present itself next. So it tells you how to upload documents. And we can't really go further because
We're not a student.
we weren't this person, so we didn't have anything to upload, but you would actually click on the button if you were doing this that says choose files. So let's say you did an electronic tax return, you would choose that file from your personal computer and then choose that file, and then you would perform the upload. We also require a verification worksheet. Again, you would be presented that verification worksheet that we would use on the prior screen. You could complete that, and then you would choose that file on your personal computer and upload through here. So we could only go so far in the IDOC process for you using this real person.
And hopefully it's pretty self-explanatory. College Board does a great job of making sure that there's all kinds of help assists on all of their web pages, whether it's a help button or whether it's chatting with someone live or whatever. There's all kinds of assistance out there for you if you have trouble with any of that. So.
The other thing I would say is we really do prefer that you use the IDOC service. It is going to be much, much faster. We prefer you not send us paper documents here of like tax returns. Again, part of this is also a protection of your data. So we'd rather not have hundreds of tax returns sitting in our office. So that's why we also use the image process with our information. A couple of the questions I know I wrote down, and maybe Christy can be reading while I answer some of the questions. Again, someone asked about what my comment was about save your stamp. It was, there's not a way to make corrections to the profile application, nor is there a need to make any corrections to any of the income information because we will get this tax information. We'll make those corrections for you. The only time we would ask that you print what you would have to do to make corrections to the profile would be to print out the paper application, cross out the information, and put the new information. And again, assets are generally not updatable. They're to be at the time you completed the application, unless, let's say you meant to put in $10,000 and maybe you missed and you hit $100,000, that's definitely a change we want to know about, and you can do that. Or you can send us an email to FinAid. Make sure you include the name of the student and identifying information. So if it's Joe Miller, chances are we have a lot of Joe Millers, so make sure there's enough information about you so that we know who the student is to connect the information. And parents, please don't just sign your name. We really need the student's name as well, because that's who's in our database. It sounds silly, but it happens frequently.
Mary, I've seen a couple of questions families are asking about if a question doesn't apply to them or if they have zero. What should they put? Should they just leave it blank? And this would apply to the FAFSA or the profiles.
Right. What we would say would be 0 is an answer. Null is really not an answer. So you should answer the question if it's been presented, even if it doesn't apply to you. We hope that the SMART applications have eliminated those questions for you. But I would say enter a 0 in there, in that character. So that was one I saw. Someone asked a question about untaxed income. Isn't that already included in the adjusted gross income? By definition, the answer to that would be no. But let me give you a specific example where I can understand why you might think that it's included. So a contribution to an IRA is reported on the tax return, And I'm going to do it in the picture in my mind of a long tax reform, 1040. So that would be, you have a line that says total income, and then you have lines that say things like IRA or teacher contribution or KEO plan. So those are actually subtractions from total income. So those actually, in that section of a tax return, reduce, they're called reductions for AGI. So no, they are untaxed income because they have reduced the adjusted gross income. But that is a really good question. Again, I think that's why we often see those are missed, because you think they're in the adjusted gross income, but it actually is a subtraction.
And Mary, I know we have a ton of more questions to get to. We're about 13 minutes over.
Okay.
Can we get to maybe 2 more questions?
Sure.
And wrap it up? Okay.
I was going to say probably one of the biggest questions that I've seen is when will we hear?
That's a great question. So early action, the restricted early action students, you already know that you're admitted, so we are anxious to start working on your financial aid notifications and get those sent out. We always hope to send those out, and I'm going to look in middle of March is our goal. And Jeton probably will tweet out that those are starting to move out when we're ready to do that, so that you have some sense. Please know that we do them in the order that they're received. If we are missing something from your file, students, we're going to email you, and we're going to tell you these are the things that our records show you're missing. So your file isn't going to be reviewed until it is completed. So very important to be watching for that and know that we do the order they received. And those of you who've been patiently waiting from early action, we know we want to get those letters to you. Those of you who are still waiting to know if you are admitted, we know you're also really anxious about that. We won't send out financial aid notifications until about 2 to 3 days after the admissions notices go out, because we want you to celebrate your notice of admission. Yeah. And I think Bob Mundy, if he's watching, would have our head. He's our director of admissions. He wouldn't like me very much if the financial aid notification preceded the celebration of your accomplishment of being admitted. So look for those in, again,
late March, early April.
Late March, early April. So again, Jeton probably will help us. She's our guru of social media, and so she'll be helping us with letting everyone know. For the regular action, we actually will drop every package that we can in the financial aid, in the mail, every financial aid notification in the mail that has been completed to that point, all on the same day. And then we will continue rolling out financial aid notifications after that particular point. Mm-hmm. If you haven't received a email that says your file was incomplete and you haven't gotten by the end of March, or after Jeton tweets out to regular action that you haven't gotten anything from us, then I would say either email to the FinAid box or give our office a call, because maybe there was a disconnect between your FAFSA and profile, and we couldn't match the data, and your things are still sitting here. If you are in our merit pool, those are invitations. We also hold back those financial aid notifications. So if you're out there and you're part of, for example, the Hesburgh-Usco Scholars Program, you already know that you're one of those nominees. Your package is going to be a little bit delayed because we want to know if you were selected for that, so we can incorporate that into the financial aid notification right up front.
Yeah, and the last question, just to kind of wrap things up, is will you be able to see this presentation? Because I know a lot of you had asked whether or not you would be able to refer back to this or watch it again in case you missed something, and the answer is yes. Absolutely. It will be on the admissions site, and Jeton, you may know where exactly.
Absolutely. Our website just actually got a facelift, so we're actually going to tweet that out tomorrow for everyone to check that out. So I don't remember the exact URL, but it is under Connect under India Missions Live. So when I get the link to the recording, I will definitely update our website, and I will also share it on our Facebook and our Twitter accounts. So if you aren't following us, make sure that you do start following us at India Missions on both Facebook and Twitter, and you will definitely be in the know.
Yeah, and we know there were a lot of questions that we didn't get to, so we're really sorry about that. But if you have a burning question or need something answered, feel free again to contact our office at the either the phone or the email that you're seeing on your screen now, and we'll get back to you quickly.
Absolutely. So without further ado, have a good night, and we'll hear from you soon or talk to you soon.
Thank you for joining.
You hit stop broadcast. You have honors.